What's up guys, I'm Lizzie. Let's talk about the 5 different ways you can stop your horse when they start bolting. So there are 5 different methods that you can use to stop your horse if they're bolting out of control with you. Number 1 is the common one rein stop, bending to a stop, negative pressure, just pulling or using voice commands, or just riding it out. And all of these might or could work for you, but it completely depends on your situation, your location, and the gear you have on your horse's head. Because there are different types of hackamores and bits that aren't meant for pulling side to side. So depending on all of that, it's good to know all the different ways to stop your horse in case you're in a situation where you don't want to use the one rein stop because your ground is trippy, and if you one rein stop, your horse could stumble or something. Or if you're like on a narrow trail and you don't have enough room to bend to a stop, or maybe your horse is completely dulled to all of the pressure that you're putting on their face and your only option is to use negative pressure. And I just want to start off by saying that if you're in a bolting situation, it's super important not to panic and not to envision the worst case scenario. Horses communicate through images because obviously they don't speak our language. So how they communicate with us is they picture what we're envisioning and feeling. Say we're jumping our horse and we're running towards the jump and we're imagining the horse is going to stop in front of that jump. We're going to be preparing ourselves for the horse to stop in front of that jump, even though we want them to go over it. So the horse is feeling your body language saying stop at this jump, and it's also getting the image that you're giving them that they're stopping. So if you're envisioning your horse stopping at that jump, the more likely that is going to happen. So it's really important that when you're riding a horse, you're never envisioning worst case scenario, you're keeping yourself calm, and you're trying to immediately diffuse the situation. You have to tell yourself that you're capable of riding a running horse and you're not going to get hurt and it's going to be okay. You're going to stop that horse. You're not going to trip and fall. It's going to be fine. You have to tell yourself those things in that situation. You can't be envisioning the worst case scenario. It's really common for people to want to duck out of those situations and eject themselves off the horse as soon as they see things going badly. But falling off is worst case scenario most of the time. So we really should just not panic and not eject ourselves and make the worst case scenario happen and figure out the issue without panicking and losing our minds. And obviously your seat is super important in this situation. So instead of trying to evacuate yourself off the horse, deepen your seat as much as possible. Think of your heels as anchors and just shove them to the ground. You do not want your legs coming up at all. You do not want your feet coming out of your stirrups. So you want to shove your heels down to the ground as much as possible to clamp that stirrup onto your foot as hard as possible so that there's no chance of it slipping out. You want to think of your legs as clamps. So you're clamping your legs to the horse's sides as tight as possible, but you also want to remember that your heel pressure to the horse's sides is a cue for them to go faster or go forward. So you want to clamp your legs as much as possible, but you want to keep your feet and your ankles off of the horse's sides. Also because pressing your feet against the horse's sides is going to mess up your feet and your stirrups, and it's going to cause your stirrups to eventually come off of your foot. So about to right here is where you want to squeeze, and then beyond that you want to not touch the horse. It's a lot to remember when you're on a bolting horse, but these things can be practiced on a non-bolting horse too. It's just a more exaggerated version of riding a normal canter. Normally, you don't want your heels dragging in the dirt if you're riding a normal canter and you want to stay at that pace. That is only a stopping cue where you drop your heels down and you're pushing on the brakes. So now that we got that out of the way, one rein stop. Most Western riders, I think, know this trick. Whether they use it or not, I don't know. But it's basically where you just take one rein and you pull it to your side, to your knee, whatever. And it's hard for a horse to run with their head to their side, so it eventually slows them down or stops them. Now, this can work, but there are also situations where it doesn't work. When my siblings and I were kids, we would ride our Icelandics, who were speed demons, crotch rockets. They would like to run a lot, and they would like to sometimes bolt. And we always reverted to the one rein stop because that's what we were taught. But a few of our horses learned that they could run with their head to their side still, basically run sideways. So it didn't always stop them and it didn't always work. And it also can be dangerous if they are running with their head to their side, that they are more likely to trip. So it's not the greatest method for stopping a bolting horse, especially if you're wearing certain kinds of headgear that aren't meant for side pulling. But there are situations where it could be the only method that works for stopping your horse if you're on a narrow trail or whatever. So that is an option. Number 2, bending to a stop. I think this one is the most effective, and I think it works with the horse's brain the best for helping them calm down. There's obviously a reason that they're bolting. They have a lot of anxiety, a lot of nerves, a lot of drive to be somewhere else, basically, because they're not comfortable, confident in where they are and who they are with. So it's best to try to diffuse the situation by helping the horse regulate. And bending to a stop can do that, especially if you practice a lot of bending in a calm environment where they learn how to do it properly. So bending to a stop is where if you're bolting, you can pick up one line like you're going to do a one-rein stop, but instead of pulling it to yourself, you're going to pull it out. And you're gonna let the horse just run in big circles, and you're slowly gonna make that circle smaller. So eventually they have to stop running because they can't run fast in a tight circle. And it kind of cools off their motor and lets them regulate basically. But you can only bend to a stop if you're in a location that allows you to run big circles, like an arena, maybe a large trail, or an open field. And number 3, the next on my list, is negative pressure. And I'm calling it negative pressure because it could be seen as a punishment because you are going at the horse with an intention of hitting them, possibly. So what I do with this negative pressure method is when my reins are long enough, I'll put them in one hand, and the other hand, I'll turn the horse like I'm going to one rein stop them, but with my other hand, I'm going to swing the end of the rein at her ear/face and make her turn her head in. It's forcing her to one rein stop, basically. But if I didn't have long enough reins, I would use a whip or something else that I could use to swing at their ear or face. The intention isn't to hit them, it's to get them to turn away from that pressure and release to my pulling pressure. I use this method if I'm in a situation where I feel like things could go badly. If we're running towards a low-hanging branch or woods or something that I do not want to be running towards, and I really want to stop like right now, that's when I will use the negative pressure method. Number 4, we got just pulling and voice command. Yes, you could use voice command for all of these others, and you probably should because you want to train your horse to your voice command, so you're going to use it along with stopping them with the other methods so that they know that that voice command usually comes along with a stop. Eventually, training them that voice command means stop. But there's a lot of flaws with the just pulling method. Pulling only works if your horse is light on the face and already knows that pulling means stop. So if you are the kind of person that does a lot of pulling in your horse's face and already know that your horse is not going to stop when you're pulling, because in reality, we're constantly pulling on the horse's face, and it's kind of losing its meaning to the horse. They don't really know what it means anymore because we're constantly doing it. We pull when we want them to have collection, we pull when we want them to back up, we pull when we want them to go forward, because usually we put pressure on the reins when we know we're gonna go fast. We pull when we want them to stop, we pull when we go side to side, we pull, we pull, we pull. Eventually, pulling becomes a mute cue to the horse, and they're going to start ignoring it. So if your horse does not stop when you are just trotting and you want them to stop and you put pressure on their face, that's not going to stop them if they are bolting out of fear, a lot of nerves, anxiety, a lot of tension when they're bolting. So we need to train our horses to respond to pulling and stop using it so frequently. And because the horse stops responding to pulling, we revert to seesawing, which when you're using a bit, this can be very painful on the horse. Even when you're using other equipment on the horse's face, it's painful to have something sawn back and forth in your mouth or on your face. So I would not recommend seesawing ever. But the problem is when we're in a sticky situation and it's all we know how to do, that's all we're gonna revert to, and it doesn't necessarily even work on the horse. What the horse needs to know is that pulling is a temporary thing that they have to respond to. They need to be able to find the answer, and we have to be able to release pressure. So it's a pressure, which means we're asking a question. If the horse is not able to find the answer to that question, they're going to eventually ignore that question. So we have to remember to always give them a yes when they find the answer. So if you want to practice stopping your horse with just pulling, you want them to stop and then you release. So if we're running, we ask them to stop by pulling. If they stop, we have to release. If they're backing up when we're pulling, we have to release. If they are giving us collection when we're pulling, we have to release. Even if we continuously want that result, we have to let them know that that's the right thing by releasing that pressure. So in order to have a bolting horse respond to pulling, we have to make sure that we have that working before we get into that situation. So just work on that a ton with your horse. Even if you don't think you're ever going to be in that situation, it's good to know that your horse will stop if you ask them to stop by pulling. And if your horse is like Stella, who loves to eat grass or treats, that can be a helpful thing to use in your training if you want them to stop when you ask them to stop, and then you reward them with a treat or letting them eat grass because they have to stop in order to eat a treat or grass. So It's not rewarding the bad behavior. You're not rewarding the bolting by letting them eat grass after they stop. You're rewarding the stop when you let them eat grass, because that's what they associate, and they will stop easier next time if you reward the stop. And finally, number 5, which is just riding it out. Now, this may sound like a disaster or like rodeo cowboy-esque methods, but it can work. And it's using the mentality of not panicking, not freaking out. You're not going to be asking the horse to go faster or do anything. You're not going to be pulling on them. You're just going to let them run. And obviously, this method only works if you are in a large arena or in a field that is safe to run in. If your horse starts running in an arena, you can ride a running horse. So the only thing that might happen is if they throw a buck or they spook. So you just have to make sure that you have a really good seat, you have a hand on your horn, you anchor your heels and stuff, and you just let the horse run. Because they're gonna stop eventually, and they're going to relax eventually, and they're going to de-escalate themselves, which means that they're going to learn how to regulate themselves and come back down to earth. And by learning that they have the control to work themselves up and let themselves come back down without us trying to stop them, they won't feel the need or the panic next time to need to be in that situation. They will immediately know how to regulate themselves by slowing down or doing whatever they did last time to fix the situation, because they're completely in control when you're just letting them run. I also like to practice this sometimes when Stella's anxious to get home and I've already exhausted all of the other methods of getting her to walk nicely. So I'll just let her run, but I won't let her stop at the driveway. I'll have her keep going straight. And I'm going to have her run back and forth past the driveway until she can walk home without me forcing her to. She likes to move fast. I get exhausted sometimes trying to get her to just walk normal. So I'll just play that game where I let her run, but I'm not going to let her run home. I'm going to let her run back and forth until she can walk home. And only when we walk home is when we get to stop at the driveway. Obviously, it works in my situation because of my setup and where I'm located. It's just what I do, and if it works for you, great. But I think that wraps it up. I hope you guys stay safe and also don't panic. And I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, give it a big like and subscribe. You can go follow me on Instagram and TikTok. Oh, and by the way, I have a TikTok shop now. I'll link that down below and you can go check that out. I post new videos every single Sunday, so don't forget to come back next week, and I'll see you next week Sunday. Bye! Bye.